The afternoon of June 12, 2025, was filled with the usual buzz of a busy international airport. At Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport in Ahmedabad, passengers for Air India Flight 171 were settling into their seats, their minds already thousands of miles away in London. The aircraft, a 12-year-old Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, was a modern marvel of engineering, a trusted workhorse of the skies. Inside, the cabin hummed with a quiet energy of anticipation. Families were returning from holidays, students were heading to universities, and business travelers were preparing for meetings. The 228 passengers, a mix of 169 Indians, 53 British, 7 Portuguese, and 1 Canadian, shared a common sense of purpose, their individual journeys just beginning. The mood was light and optimistic. The 14-person crew, seasoned professionals from Air India, moved through the aisles with practiced ease, their calm smiles reassuring even the most nervous flyers. As the final boarding checks were completed, the cabin doors were sealed, creating a self-contained world ready to bridge continents. Outside, the Gujarati sun beat down on the tarmac, but inside, the climate-controlled environment was a sanctuary of comfort. The engines spooled up with a powerful, confident roar, a sound that promised a smooth and uneventful 8-hour flight to London Gatwick. For everyone on board, this was just another Thursday, another flight, another step forward in their lives. At exactly 1:38 p.m. local time, Flight AI 171 began its takeoff roll. The powerful General Electric engines pushed the massive jet down the runway, gathering speed with incredible force. The aircraft lifted off the ground, a moment of pure aviation magic, as it began its climb into the clear blue sky. Passengers by the windows watched as the landscape of Ahmedabad shrank below them, the city's buildings and streets becoming a miniature map. The initial ascent felt strong and steady, the familiar sensation of being pressed back into their seats, reassuring them that all was normal. The seatbelt sign remained illuminated as the plane continued to gain altitude, aiming for its cruising path. But something was terribly wrong. Just moments after leaving the ground, the familiar feeling of a powerful climb vanished. The plane seemed to struggle, its nose pointing upwards, but its altitude barely increasing. It felt, as one survivor would later describe, as if the aircraft was stuck, fighting against an invisible force that held it down. Despite the deafening roar of the engines, the Dreamliner was not gaining height. It had reached a maximum altitude of only 625 feet, a dangerously low level for a jet of its size. The pilots in the cockpit were now locked in a desperate battle, trying to understand why their state-of-the-art machine was refusing to fly. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere switched from routine procedure to high-stakes emergency in a matter of seconds. Alarms blared as the pilots fought with the controls, their training and experience pushed to the absolute limit. They were wrestling with a catastrophic loss of lift, a situation where the wings were no longer generating enough force to keep the nearly 250-ton aircraft airborne. The crew declared an emergency, their voices strained but professional over the radio, alerting air traffic control to their dire predicament. Every instrument panel would have been flashing warnings, indicating a cascade of failures that were dragging the plane back towards the densely populated city below. It was a pilot's worst nightmare unfolding in real time. In the passenger cabin, the initial sense of calm evaporated and was replaced by a wave of confusion and then raw fear. The gentle climb had turned into a sickening, sluggish drift, punctuated by violent shudders that rattled the aircraft's frame. Passengers gripped their armrests, their knuckles white, as they exchanged terrified glances across the aisles. The cheerful cabin announcements were gone, replaced by the urgent, shouted commands of the flight attendants. Brace, brace, brace for impact. The sound of prayers and cries filled the air as people realized the horrifying truth. They were not going to London. They were going down, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The world outside the windows became a terrifying, fast-approaching blur. Instead of seeing clouds, passengers saw the rooftops of buildings getting larger and larger with alarming speed. Videos taken by stunned onlookers on the ground would later show the horrifying spectacle. The Air India Dreamliner, its landing gear still down, flying perilously low over the city. Its nose was pointed high in the air in a desperate attempt to climb, but the aircraft was sinking inexorably downward. It was a ghost plane, its engines screaming but its wings failing, unable to escape the pull of gravity that was sealing its fate and the fate of everyone on board. The final seconds must have been an eternity of sheer terror. The aircraft scraped over buildings, its massive shadow passing over streets and homes as people below ran for cover. The crew, in their final heroic act, likely tried to steer the crippled jet towards any open space they could find, a desperate maneuver to minimize the loss of life on the ground. But there was no time and no space. The plane was too low, too heavy, and moving too fast. The flight data recorder, later recovered from the wreckage, would show that the final signal was received just seconds after it took off, marking the end of a flight that lasted barely 5 minutes from start to finish. The end came with a devastating impact. At approximately 1:43 p.m., Flight AI-171 crashed directly into the BJ Medical College, one of Ahmedabad's most prominent educational institutions. The aircraft slammed into the college's dining hall and a nearby student hostel, obliterating the structures in an instant. The jet, loaded with thousands of gallons of fuel for its long-haul journey to London, exploded into a massive fireball that sent a column of thick black smoke billowing into the sky, visible for miles. The deafening sound of the explosion echoed across the city. A thunderous roar that signaled a tragedy of unimaginable scale had just occurred. The scene on the ground was one of utter devastation and chaos. Where buildings once stood, there was now a crater of burning debris, twisted metal, and shattered concrete. The crash site was a vision from hell, an inferno that consumed everything in its path. First responders from the Indian Army and local civil authorities were on the scene within minutes, but the intense heat and raging fires made immediate rescue efforts nearly impossible. They were joined by hundreds of local residents who, despite the danger, rushed towards the disaster zone to help, forming human chains to pass buckets of water and pull people away from the flames. The human toll was catastrophic. On the ground, at least 28 people were killed, their lives extinguished in a flash as they went about their daily routines. Among the dead were at least 5 medical students, young people with bright futures ahead of them, who were in the wrong place at the most tragic time imaginable. Dozens more were injured, many with severe burns, including at least 30 other students. The campus, a place of learning and healing, had been transformed into a scene of mass casualties, with ambulance sirens wailing and emergency workers navigating a landscape of destruction and sorrow that was beyond comprehension. Miraculously, amid the carnage, there was a single survivor from the plane. Vishwashkumar Ramesh, a British national of Indian origin who was seated in seat 11A, was thrown clear of the main wreckage. He was found alive but severely injured, suffering from extensive burns. His survival was a 1 in a million chance, a sliver of light in an otherwise dark and heartbreaking event. For the other 241 souls on board, the passengers and the crew, there was no such miracle. They perished in the impact and the subsequent fire, their journeys cut short in the most violent way possible. The total death toll climbed to at least 269, making it one of the deadliest aviation disasters in India's history. In the hours and days that followed, Ahmedabad was a city shrouded in grief. The initial shock gave way to a profound sense of collective mourning as the true scale of the tragedy became clear. Grieving families from across India and around the world began to descend on the city, their hopes shattered, desperate for any news of their loved ones. They gathered at hospitals and temporary post-mortem centers, their faces etched with anguish and disbelief. The process of identifying the victims was a slow and painful one, as many of the remains were burned beyond recognition, requiring extensive DNA testing to provide families with the certainty they so desperately needed. The response from the government was swift and solemn. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi flew to Ahmedabad to visit the crash site, describing the scene as heartbreaking beyond words. He also visited the lone survivor, Vishwashkumar Ramesh, in the hospital, offering words of comfort and promising a thorough investigation into the cause of the crash. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB, immediately took charge, securing the crash site and beginning the arduous task of piecing together what went wrong. Both the cockpit voice recorder and the digital flight data recorder, the crucial black boxes, were recovered from the wreckage on Friday, June 13th, bringing hope that answers would soon be found. The investigation became a major international effort, with experts from the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, Boeing, and engine manufacturer General Electric joining their Indian counterparts. The focus turned to critical questions. Was it a catastrophic engine failure? Was there a problem with the wing flaps or a loss of essential flight control systems? India's aviation regulator ordered immediate inspections of all Air India Boeing 787s equipped with the same GNX engines, a precautionary measure to prevent another disaster. The crash also sent shockwaves through the aviation industry, marking the first fatal incident for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner model and causing a sharp drop in Boeing's stock price. Today, 18 days after the tragedy, the memory of Flight AI-171 remains a deep wound in the heart of the nation and the global community. It stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the immense responsibility that rests on the shoulders of the aviation industry. As the investigation continues, we must honor the memory of the 269 lives that were so tragically lost, the passengers, the crew, and the innocent victims on the ground. We extend our deepest sympathies to the families who are navigating an ocean of grief. May they find strength in their communities, and may the souls of those who perished rest in eternal peace.